When a loved one becomes abusive, the outcome can be devastating, often leaving the victims heartbroken and feeling helpless. Unfortunately, millions of Americans all across the country have to deal with the devastating realities of domestic violence. My name is Eboni K. I'm a lawyer, a journalist, and a longtime advocate for domestic violence survivors. Today, we're going to talk about 3 tools to help survivors, victims, and their allies understand how to navigate this system, navigate these experiences, and ultimately be empowered. Today, we're also going to draw on the incredible insight and knowledge of TalksOnLaw, as well as fantastic pro bono attorneys and public interest lawyers. So before we jump into the tools, let's start with the basics. What exactly is domestic violence? Well, first of all, it's not one thing, there's not one type of abuser, and there's not even one type of victim. 1 in 3 women find themselves to be the victim of domestic abuse, and 1 in 4 men find themselves to be victims of domestic abuse. So the first tool we'll talk about is safety planning. Now, a safety plan is a personalized strategy that helps you remain safe while you're in the relationship, as you're planning to leave the relationship, and even after you leave the relationship. It can include a lot of different parts. For one thing, how to protect your children or even your pets, how to make sure that you can potentially still go to your job, feel safe. It evaluates what your friends know, what they might be telling other people, even including the abuser. So think of a safety plan as a bit of a checklist. You want to think about what the abuser knows about you, where you work, where your friends live, where your parents live, perhaps where the children go to school. Do you all share a phone plan or other ways and devices that you can be tracked? So the next tool we're going to talk about is saving evidence and documentation. Now, it's basically exactly as it sounds. It's one thing to survive the abuse and leave the abuser, but it's another thing to be able to ultimately find justice in a court of law. What becomes imperatively important is that they've got the evidence, that your lawyers and attorneys have the evidence to prove that you were indeed abused. Now, while this can feel daunting, it's absolutely doable. Some things you want to consider are documenting the evidence of the abuse itself, if it's physical abuse. That can include taking photographs, and not just one. You want to take a photograph when the abuse happens, and also duration of its healing process. That can help prove the severity of how hard the abuse was. You also want to think about recording phone calls, saving text messages. And don't just assume that because it's in your phone, it's preserved. What happens if your phone gets lost or stolen? So you want to make sure that you have copies, photocopies and otherwise digital copies saved so that you can provide them with your attorney. The preservation of evidence can also include your social media accounts. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, and others. Your direct messaging in those spaces and your public profiles. So make sure you preserve all of that evidence. That can include taking screenshots and again, saving them, photocopying them in multiple places. You also want to make sure you preserve the evidence and documentation of the actual damages you incur. Now, this could include medical bills. If you see a therapist, your therapy bills. Also, some physical damages you might incur. Say a broken windshield, you want to get the receipt for the replacement cost of the windshield, as an example. So the third tool we'll talk about are protective orders. Protective orders are documents given out by the court that restrict the movements and abusive behaviors of the abuser. The good news about a protective order is it can include more than just the survivor or victim. It extends to potentially their children, their pets, and also it makes sure that the victim and survivor is safe, whether they are at home, whether they are at work, whether they're at school, also in their social media life, and otherwise. So it's important to remember that the protective order itself is an important tool, but it's the reporting of the violation that gets the abuser held accountable. And that accountability could even include them being arrested. Listen, surviving an abusive relationship is never easy, but know that there is plenty of support and resources to help you. This can include organizations and groups, as well as attorneys that are all there to help support you navigate this process. We've provided a link with additional resources right here on this explainer, so check it out for more information. I'm Eboni K. and thanks for watching Talks on Law.